What you're about to watch is a conversation I had with a carer who works in the private sector. She spoke to me on condition of anonymity for fear of losing her job, which is understandable. What she details amounts to gross negligence manslaughter. It's the story of a care home, blind to the severity of the danger posed by coronavirus, whose actions killed 10 of its residents and left many more in a life-threatening condition. Close to half of the people being cared for there. I began by asking her what life in the care home was like before the pandemic. Tell me about your place of work, and on a normal day when there isn't a lethal pandemic going on, what's the situation? How many patients do you have? All that sort of stuff.
We have 3 floors in our care home. We are mostly 2 floors of dementia and Alzheimer's, and the middle floor is nursing, which means they are mostly in bed for the days. The dementia floors, we have one that is more aggressive patients, and the other floor is more calm. They're more, you can talk to them better. They have a bit more understanding. So a normal day, we would obviously go in, check on them, make sure they're fine. Any one of the dementia patients that are up, they would have their breakfast. Then we would go in, do their personal care, get them up, bring them out into the lounge, play games with them, dance. We have this one lady that loves to dance to 50s music. So, and she's actually still does cartwheels down the hallway. So
how old is she?
She's in her 60s, and she's absolutely amazing. So we do have competitions to see who can actually get down the corridor the fastest with the cartwheels. Generally, she wins.
Impressive. I mean, just hearing you talk about it like that, I think this is a point we'll get into more. But obviously, I think there's an element people sort of think of these people in care homes. I feel like they almost forget that they are people, aren't they? And they have personalities, and they're varied, and they're different, and they're not all just, none of them are this sort of impression of, like just an old person in a chair who doesn't say anything. They have their own personalities. They are people. It feels weird having to express that, but
yeah, they are people, and they still have feelings too. And just because they don't understand everything, they're still in there, and they do still understand quite a bit, depending on how much their illness has progressed. But we have residents that like to play balloon, and they like to play Jenga, and I've played Scrabble with a 97-year-old. I obviously only spelt words like it and can, and she did win again at 97, but she knows an awful lot of words than I do. But we have a lady that loves to talk about her family, and she's they're missing them. And you can see that they're missing them. But yeah, our residents are human beings. Just the illness doesn't define them.
And so, could you provide a little bit more detail on, for a lot of people, myself included, when you say that an Alzheimer or a patient with dementia becomes aggressive, what does that mean? Is that because of confusion? How does that manifest itself?
It depends. They can get agitated. They can be absolutely fine with you 1 minute, and then just in a split second, if they don't understand something or if they get scared, then they can, it is like a switch going off, and then obviously they can get physical, they can get verbal. Generally, most of the time, it's during personal care, because you explain to them what you're doing, and you explain it to them constantly, but they get frightened. They don't want you. They're the older generation. They don't want other people washing them and dressing them, and they don't understand that they can't do it themselves anymore, and they do need assistance. And then obviously they get frustrated and agitated, so then they get physical. And like I said, and verbal as well. But they're scared.
Now, obviously, in light of current circumstances with the coronavirus going on, I mean, it must have complicated all of that to the nth degree. I mean, let alone trying to practice social distancing if you need to wash and bathe someone.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me how it's changed things.
Well,
we cannot under no circumstances say stay 2 meters away from our colleagues or the residents. We are all they have. They have us to rely on. We're their family. Um, the, they are, to an extent, they are being barrier nursed in their rooms, which means they're in their rooms and they're not allowed out. Um, we, we have finally been given the PPE to go in and assist them. Well, a member of staff came back from Italy. He was off for 72 hours, then he came back to work, and then within a couple of days he went down poorly, him and his partner, and then it kind of took off from there, really. The staff started going down with it, and then obviously the residents started to show symptoms, but we were told that we would not get any PPE until we had the first confirmed positive case of COVID-19. So we had staff were in there working whilst they had the symptoms of COVID-19. One member of staff went in and she was coughing. She had the dry throat. She didn't feel very well. She went and spoke to the bosses. They took her temperature and said, "You don't have a temperature. You can't go home." So then that carer obviously went back onto the floor, was doing the personal care. Obviously, we didn't have the PPE, so she breathed on the other residents.
So I mean, so what you're saying is I mean, by implication, by allowing this member of staff to go back out and be inside the personal space of these, I mean, these are an at-risk group. These are, and be within less than 2 meters of them, and your concern would be then that they have transmitted the virus, the disease.
Yeah, and then obviously the patients, the residents, as we like to call them, they don't, because they don't understand that they will walk around the corridors, they will touch other residents, they will touch and kiss other members of staff, because they don't understand. So then obviously it spreads even further.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how do you go about isolating someone with dementia?
You can't, unless they are bedbound anyway. You cannot isolate someone that's got dementia. You cannot forcibly keep them in a room and lock them in, because it's restraint, it's against human rights, because even though they have dementia and Alzheimer's, they still have human rights. And you cannot keep a person with dementia or Alzheimer's shut in a room. It doesn't happen. And also it's their safety as well, because if they start to get agitated or anxious, they're going to start to hit things, throw things. Do you know what I mean? So it's not, you cannot do it. It's just not going to happen.
So, okay. So I interrupted you there. Let's go back to, you were telling me about how coronavirus has changed. You talk about barrier nursing, and we got a little bit away from that. Could you tell me a bit more about that, and how it's the physical provision of care has changed for your residents?
It's a lot. We're not supposed to stay in the rooms with them for very often anymore, because they don't want us to obviously spread it even further. So we go in with the residents. We have to quickly, it's hands, face, and private areas, wash them, and then leave them. And then obviously we don't see them for maybe another hour or so. We go and check on them. We take them in a drink. We give them some snacks and their lunch. But they're not seeing the carers like they were when they're sat in the lounge. We're not being able to do activities with them as much. The families aren't being able to see them. We have masks. We were told that we weren't allowed to wear the masks. When we asked for masks, they said no, because they have dementia and Alzheimer's, and they don't want the residents to get scared, because if they see the masks, it could freak them out. But then finally, we were given the PPE. And it doesn't actually scare the residents. We just tell them that we're playing doctors and nurses, and that we're playing dress up for a day. There are ways around it. But it's affected the residents' daily lives, but it's also affecting the staff, because we feel bad because they're not getting the care that they deserve. Because we're told that we can only stay in with them for a matter of 10 minutes, whereas normally we would spend as long as we wanted with them, making them look nice, choosing their clothes with them. So yeah, so it was about 6 weeks ago that the resident come back from Italy, and it was probably a week after that that he ended up going off of work. Then slowly more carers were going off, and then it was probably 2 weeks ago that we finally got the PPE, because we had a positive case in a resident of COVID-19.
So it was after someone had tested positive about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we had an email from our bosses, like a video email, saying that everything was fine, but we weren't allowed the PPE until we had a positive COVID-19 resident. But the staff weren't being tested, and we were told that it was just a bug. We had just picked up a bug. We didn't have COVID-19 because we were only suspected. We weren't coming up as positive because obviously the staff weren't being tested.
Well, I was going to say, how would they know if it was a bug if they weren't testing you?
Exactly. But we, in where we work, we are made to feel if we have a day off sick, because we are not superhuman beings. We do get poorly, but we are made to feel like we're just skiving. So people will go into the care home with any sort of bug just so they don't get made to feel bad. The staff that took it in the first place, we weren't given the correct PPE. We were told that we could not have it until we had a positive case, the first positive case of COVID-19. But yet they had 5 tests, I think it was, and they tested 5 residents in the end. But we only knew that we had a positive COVID-19 resident because the lady had gone into hospital, and she tested positive for it but didn't have any symptoms. Then we finally got the PPE. So we have the gloves, the aprons, the masks. But again, it is too little too late. We've lost probably about 10, I think it's 10 residents now, and there's still more that are not good, and they're not going to make it. Our hand sanitizer, when all of the COVID-19 started to really come out, they actually took the hand sanitizer away from us, and they locked it in the office, and we were told that because there was a national shortage, we couldn't have the hand sanitizer, so we would just have to use soap and water. Some staff even brought in their own hand sanitizers, and we just kept it in our pockets because it was taken off of us.
It sounds like the sort of the things that you're building up to, this removal of hand sanitizer at a time when there is contagious respiratory disease, where that sort of thing is useful for slowing the spread, the lack of testing, the lack of PPE. It sounds like this is. It's building up to negligence, is what it sounds like to me.
It does, but yet the carers are absolutely fantastic. They're all working so hard, but the problem comes from the top. They should have made sure that we had enough. They knew this was going on. They watched the news. I understand that there's a national shortage, but they should have made sure that we were wearing PPE and we had it all in place and we were giving it from the start. As soon as the first person come down poorly and had to go home, we should have been given that PPE. I see it more as negligent to the staff, not to the residents, because if they'd looked after the staff, then the residents would never have hopefully the residents would never have caught it in the first place.
Yeah, and with there being a shortage of the hand sanitizer and then withdrawing it seems the logic doesn't follow. Okay, so it's your belief that because the staff weren't taken care of properly, a member of staff has then brought coronavirus into the care home.
Yeah.
And so how many of your residents have died since then?
There is 10 that have died so far, and we still have a few that are very poorly. And there's about 60 residents we have.
60?
Yes. They are. When the resident has been getting poorly, we were told that they've just picked up, one of them's got a chest infection, or someone's got this, or they've got that. they will not admit that it's COVID-19. But then we don't have enough tests for the residents to be tested. But we know it's COVID-19 because in the years that I've worked there, we have never had so many deaths in 1 week.
So you're saying that must be about 15-20% of your residents have died, and typically, just to sort of to illustrate how significant that is, I mean, how many would die normally
in a week?
None.
Really?
In a week, yeah. We have a very low death rate in our home because they are very well looked after. You know, you cannot fault that. It's probably a couple every 6 months. We've had people in our home that they've come in on end of life and they've actually left home and moved back home.
Oh wow!
Recuperated, and they've got better, and they've actually gone home when they were brought in just to pass away.
And so you've gone from 1 or 2 in the space of 6 months to, I mean, what sort of time window are we looking at for these 10 or so deaths? Is this you had 8 in 1 week?
Yeah, which was last week. Monday to Friday, we had 8 deaths.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry. I know, obviously, you must form a close bond with these people.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, it's difficult. You know, we've looked after them. Some of us have been in this care home for a long time, looking after the same residents. One lady we've got, she's been in the care home for 15 years, and now she's been in a hell of a state since Friday. She's not going to pull through, but she's holding on, and it's so sad to see because if they're in these sort of states, they should at least be made to feel comfortable. They should be given Oromorph. They should be given the just in case box. And it's sad to see these elderly people in their 80s and 90s struggling to breathe, and they're clinging on for days. It's just, and to see it's the people that we care about. They're our family,
and presumably as well, they're not allowed. They can't see their
family. We've had families ring up all the time. We had a lady come in. They let her in to see her mum, and she managed. We don't know how she did it, but she managed to stay in all night. She was only allowed 10 minutes, and then the next morning she went home. She was going to come back, but they had a phone call because she died. The lady died, so the daughter luckily didn't have to come back, but she wasn't allowed back. She was told that she couldn't come in because she'd been there all night. So really, when her mum needed her, she wasn't allowed in.
Would you be able to explain what that sort of that end of life process is like? Because I imagine normally, close family, friends, or whatever are there at that time, and I assume now your colleagues are the people there.
We take it in turns to sit with the residents. We sit with them for half an hour each, and then we will rotate it so they are not on their own, because nobody should die on their own. And we talk to them, we reminisce over what we've, from when we first met them to like now, the funny things that they've done. We talk to them about their families, and we sit and we hold their hands until they take their last breath. But it doesn't end there. Once they've gone, we have to then lay them out, make them look nice, wash them, ready for when the funeral directors come and pick them up. So if the families are allowed to see them or are allowed to come in, they get to see how lovely that they act. It's absolutely awful. And we don't get time to grieve, because by the time we finish with one person, we have to move on to the next. And then that person dies, and then it's somebody else. And they're on their own. And the staff are doing so well, and I take my hat off to everybody I work with. But it's just so difficult. It is so difficult.
Well, I take my hat off to you. I'm so grateful for what you're doing. I mean, presumably you haven't had the space to sort of emotionally decompress and deal with what's going on.
Well, I'm quite lucky because my husband can still work, and I'm obviously still working. So he will, when he goes to work, I have to stay at home to look after our daughter because her nursery shuts, so we have nobody to have our daughter. So someone's got to be at home with her. So I'm lucky. Like this week, I have had a few days to get my head around losing so many people. But there are members of staff up there, like the people that work there from other countries are working so hard. They're doing 14, 15-hour shifts. They're finishing work and they're going back in at 7 o'clock in the morning because they don't have family here. That, you know, so they're being leaned on. So, like, you know, so they're there all the time. Whereas I'm one of the lucky ones. I do have my daughter here, so I can take a step back and have a few days. But not all of the carers are that lucky.
What have you thought? What's your thought process been in the wake of this? Do you feel angry?
Yeah, I feel angry. I'm not the only one. There is a fair few members of staff where I work that feel like our managers have let us down and let the residents down. It should never have happened. It should not have got to this point. They could have done more to have stopped the spread, but also the government could have done more. They could have sent us more tests. The care homes need tests. They need to be tested. The staff need to be tested, not just whether it's a temperature or a cough, you know, because some people aren't even getting a temperature with it. You know, not everyone's having all of the symptoms, but they need to give care homes tests.
Do you feel? I mean, I know the phrase we used earlier, I think, was forgotten, but I mean, obviously at the moment in the statistics, the death count that the government's providing doesn't include care homes. It's just about hospitals, and so there's a big delay, big gap on when their reporting comes through. I think we're about 10, 14 days ahead, something like that. I mean, do you think that the situation in care homes is as severe as what's happening in hospitals? I mean, certainly in your instance, it would seem so.
Yeah, I think it is. We are forgotten. You know, I do completely and take my hat off to the NHS. You know, they're doing a fantastic job. But it's not just about the people that are going into hospitals. What about the elderly? They have family. They have friends. You know, they are someone's grandma, someone's mum, someone's... Do you know what I mean? Yeah. What about them? They should have a voice too, and they should be looked after. Just because they're elderly and they've got Alzheimer's and dementia, they should not be left in the background, or just because they're old, you know, they're at the end of their life anyway. They are still people and they are still human, and they should be treated just as well as the people in the NHS and in the hospitals.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.